Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Today's Tuesday. What is it? January 10th, 2023. So I'm 10 days into the new year. I'm already confused. That's the reason why we have the Prince of Twitter, the regent of redstate.com, Andrew Malcolm, with us at AH Malcolm on the Twitterses. And redstate.com is where he posts his VIP content several times a week. Actually, pretty much every day these days, right, Andrew?
Frequently, yeah.
Wow. So it's working for
keeps my mind going, Ed.
Well, then you're one ahead of me.
Yeah.
You're out in front of me on that one there. So I don't know what to tell you. But Andrew, I mean, you've got a column up today. You've got your Malcolm on the right. We got to talk about what happened last week in the House of Representatives, because that's interesting. But the very first thing we got to talk about is this tweet from yesterday. This would be Sunday, in Joe Biden's visit to the border. Joe Biden finally visited the border, and apparently Joe Biden's breathing suit finally visited the
it is so weird. It's on my timeline, and he's visiting a center to, I don't know, do something for the illegal immigrants. He's talking with a woman pretending to care, and he's standing still, and the back of his suit is moving in and out like he's breathing. It's the weirdest thing. I didn't see this. Somebody else did. And I watched it several times. I thought, well, this is weird. A lot of people seem to agree. It's there's no explanation for it. I mean, he doesn't have a breathing tube in. You could think it might be some kind of a drug pump. If it was a lightweight Kevlar vest, it shouldn't be breathing.
I have a solution to this. I don't know if it's a solution, but I have one possibility, is that maybe he just wears cheap suits.
Yeah.
Maybe it just doesn't fit very well, and every time he moves, it bunches up and back.
Yeah,
having owned a number of cheap suits in my lifetime, I could tell you.
I figured that, but if you watch his shoulders, they're not moving.
Yeah, they're not
but
moving.
The back of his jacket is, and it's weird. What can I say? I wrote a few months ago, I wrote about this thing on the side of his neck. It looks like a terrible growth. He's never explained what that is. I said, what the heck is that on Joe Biden's neck? And now we got this.
But it's
yeah. Well,
don't question his health, Andrew. It's you can't question anything these days.
No, that's true. And he says, you had your column, it wasn't a column, but you had a post today about how he's going to move to the middle for 2024.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe, that's the God's truth. Biden is going to change his tune.
Yeah, that and $5 will get you a cafe latte over it. So, well, more like $7 these days at Starbucks. Yeah, this idea that Joe Biden is suddenly going to rediscover his centrist inclinations is absurd. This is a guy who, I don't think he's ever really been a centrist anyway. He's just been very good at telling people what they want to hear. But I think his natural inclination is to be a big government interventionist. And he spent the last 2 years doing that, even though he knew that he didn't have the math in the Senate to pull it off. I don't buy for a second that this guy is going to be smart enough to triangulate back to the center. Bill Clinton did pull that off.
And he did, but he actually did. And he went along with some things and negotiated, and he didn't call Newt Gingrich the devil. I mean, he's just, he was a Paul. He was a snaky Paul, and it worked. I guess, you have to expect that. But, Obama and Biden are just, they're cut from another bad suit.
Yep. Yeah. It's a whole bunch of bad suits going on. But, Yeah, I don't buy for a second that that Joe Biden is going to tack to the center over the next 2 years. If for no other reason, I don't think that the Senate Democrats are going to allow him to do it, and I'm really sure that the House Progressives aren't going to let him do it. They're looking for they're spoiling for a fight. Both sides benefit from a fight. Neither's, unfortunately. I'm not saying that this is good, but I'm telling you that right now, Hakeem Jeffries is not a centrist. He doesn't benefit from a centrist agenda. I didn't delve this deeply into it in my post, but the progressives make up, what is it, about 60%? The House Progressive Caucus, well, maybe not 60%, but there's 95 members, or at least there were prior to the midterm election. So it's still a significant part of that caucus. That caucus is 213 members. And if you got 90 or so of those who are in the progressive caucus, well, that caucus is going to get a lot more vehemently activist as they see the possibilities of Republicans combining up with some of their moderates to pass legislation. They're going to try to block it. So, and besides which, Biden wants to be FDR and LBJ wrapped up in one. He still wants
good luck. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
If he had 60 members of the Senate, he wasn't going to pass some of this stuff. And with the Republican House, it's not going to happen at all. It's going to be trench warfare in the Beltway. Speaking of which, Andrew, how late did you stay up on Friday night to see the trench warfare going on?
No, not very late. Not very late. I figured, I didn't know it was 15, but I figured it would be going on a while. And
going on all weekend.
And that's what struck me for my column was on display majorly out of Washington, because the media thinks they're important in Washington, therefore anything that happens there is more important. But there were two Republican parties on display, and that was the theme of my of my Sunday column. And the other one was in Tallahassee, where Ron DeSantis had his inaugural speech, which I found to be quite effective. Delivered better than he has been delivering speeches, I thought. He's obviously practiced that one. And with a list of accomplishments and a list of goals. And he wasn't talking, I don't think he said a word about 2020. So he wasn't attacking anybody. He was talking about what Florida is. And I love the line, Florida is where woke goes to die. So, it was a great opportunity for him. He didn't get all that much publicity nationally. So I thought I would write about it. And it was kind of a rough blueprint for what his campaign theme would be should he go ahead. I think he will, but there's no guarantee.
Right. I think he's definitely going to go ahead. I mean, he's got nearly 100, well, at least at the end of the cycle, he had nearly $100 million in the bank. He won Florida by 19 points. He flipped Miami-Dade. I mean, there's no other time to jump into this race. I think it's an absolute certainty that DeSantis is going to run for the nomination in this cycle. Yeah. And look, I mean, I think it's a good comparison. However, I will say this. I think what you saw all last week was basically legislating in the manner that, a legislature is supposed to do it, where you have people who are actually fighting issues out in public, as embarrassing as it might have been at times, and as close to literal fighting as it actually got. Because I was actually awake for the 14th ballot on Friday, right? Because they're going to come back at 10 o'clock. That's 9 o'clock my time. I'll be watching TV with my wife, but I'll have it open on my laptop, right? I do C-SPAN on the laptop, and I'm watching this thing, and then immediately afterwards, I see this whole scene unfolding with Matt Gaetz, and Mike Rogers had to be physically restrained at one point, and it was clear that he and Kevin McCarthy were barking at each other over something, because McCarthy kept turning around and going back, and they're pointing fingers at each other. And then, they moved to adjourn, and then all of a sudden somebody, I don't know who it was, but somebody leaned in and you didn't see their face from the camera, but somebody leaned way in and was saying something to Matt Gaetz, and whatever was said to Matt Gaetz, and I still don't know exactly what it was. Suddenly his mind was changed and he didn't want to adjourn after all. I was asleep by that point in time. I was like, I'll read about it tomorrow.
Well, you're right. You're right about there is a legislative mind and there's an executive mind.
Right,
and
right.
Some legislators can switch. Now, DeSantis, he was in the House.
He was.
He didn't have all that much impact. I don't recall. And not a lot of House members, Abraham Lincoln aside, not a lot of House members have gone on, certainly not directly to the White House.
All right. So I got to stop you right there, Andrew. You know who was the last one to do this? Because I think John Quincy Adams may have been the first one to do this. I know he went back to the House after he was president, but do you know who the last person was to go directly from the House of Representatives to the presidency?
No.
We were at his inauguration. You and I were at his inauguration. James Garfield. For pretty much his whole presidency. No, I'm joking. This is 1881, right? Yeah. James Garfield got assassinated later that year, so he didn't last long, unfortunately. But James,
so Garfield, don't go from the House to the presidency. That's the lesson. Well, but one of my points in the column was Democrats instinctively turn to Congress for their candidates. I think with one or two exceptions since the Depression, all of their vice presidential candidates have been from Congress. And many of their presidential candidates, both in 2004, both of them, Edwards and what's his name, Kerry, were from the Senate. Republicans, not always, but Republicans tend to go for governors and or executives. Even Wendell Willkie back in 1940, he ran a huge power company, and he didn't win, obviously. And George H.W. Bush, he had so many executive jobs. He wasn't a governor, but his son was. So it would make a lot of sense traditionally or historically for Republicans to find a governor. This time, they seem to like those guys.
Well, it does make sense. I mean, their last pick was somebody who was an executive in the private sector, right? I would argue maybe the wrong model of executive in the private sector. They picked somebody who ran a family business rather than, say, a large corporation with lots of different competing interests, where you're basically dealing with shareholders and other stakeholders and that type of thing. But they have been generally focused on people who had achieved something in executive terms. I mean, McCain may have been the one exception, right? I mean, you go back and take a look at this. Mitt Romney, Donald Trump. We already covered Donald Trump. Mitt Romney was, was the CEO of Bain and did all sorts of different things as an executive. McCain, being an exception, came out of
but McCain was the heir apparent, right? He lost.
Yes,
he lost to George W. So it was his turn by 2008.
Right. So George W. was a governor, and then
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan was a governor, but I mean, Bob Dole wasn't. So I mean, that was I don't want to say it was a mistake,
and that didn't work.
It didn't work. But George Bush was vice president. It was one of the rare occasions of a vice president winning an election, succeeding his former running mate, without there being a transition due to death or resignation.
And you could argue that was basically a third Reagan term.
Oh, definitely was a third Reagan term. There's no doubt about it. It was a third Reagan term. Then you got to go back to Nixon. Nixon wasn't an executive. Well, I take that back. Nixon was vice president for 8 years. So yeah, I mean, Republicans, I think, really do favor the executive model, and I think it works. And Democrats have been successful with it. Bill Clinton, for all of the different
Eisenhower
was the commanding
supreme commander. Yeah, that's pretty executive.
That's super executive. That's really, really, really executive. But Democrats have followed that model from time to time too. I mean, FDR was Secretary of the Navy, which is a executive branch job at least, prior to being president, and was a businessman as well. And so I think that for myself, I prefer the executive model for an executive office. And DeSantis, if you're going to do something like that, if you're going to go from legislator to executive, it's better to do it at the state level and to prove your worth. And look, I mean, DeSantis 4 years ago got elected in one of the thinnest margins in the country, right? I think it was like 0.18% or something like that over Andrew Gillum, who then completely self-destructed, right? Gillum completely self-destructed, is under investigation for corruption anyway. And from that, 4 years later, just 4 years later, he defeats a former governor of Florida by 19 points and carries Miami-Dade. I mean, when you're looking at that, and you see that, and you're comparing the two things, what happened in the House of Representatives over the last week or so, and Ron DeSantis's presentation, it's not difficult to figure out which ones Republicans really want to highlight.
Yeah,
January, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's it's interesting what the collective party proclivities are, and like you, I prefer the executive level.
Yes. So that's one of your, we don't want to give away the store here. You go over there, you sign up for VIP, you read what Andrew has to say. Better yet, sign up for VIP Gold so you can do VIP on all of our sites. Then you go to Malcolm on the right. Florida's governor, Ron DeSantis, takes the stage and sets another stage. And it's sort of a continuation of what you're talking about here, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That one was basically looking at the contents of the speech alone, not the bigger political picture. Right. And I found the speech, a lot of people didn't because they don't want that narrative, but I found the speech to be impressive. He had ringing phrases in there, and things that could be campaign themes, and declarations of firm intent, decisiveness, which is not what we saw in the House fight. So I think a lot of people will find that compelling. It's so early. You can't be making any predictions, but he certainly at the moment seems to be the prime challenger for a Donald Trump if Donald Trump stays in the race.
Yeah, and I think that there are going to be other people jumping in the race. I mean, there
will be, and Mike Pence, for instance, he was in the House. Then he decided to, because he wanted to get more politics, he went to become governor of Indiana for 2 terms.
Right.
And Nikki Haley was a successful governor for 2 terms. Mike Pompeo
in Congress, yeah.
Yeah, Mike Pompeo. And you could argue that being an ambassador is an executive level job. Absolutely. She was in Trump's cabinet. No,
I would say ambassadors. Yeah. So that's, you're talking about John Bolton was the buzz over the weekend because supposedly he told a British newspaper that he was running for president, and that Bolton, so they reported it that way. And Bolton said, it's not what I said. And if I was going to announce my candidacy, I'd be smart enough not to do it in England.
Yeah, really. It makes no sense.
Yeah. He was talking about it in terms of a hypothetical. If I was going to run for president, et cetera, et cetera. And, we are used to that here in the United States, because we know about the laws that kick into place once you've made an official declaration of a candidacy. All of a sudden, there's all sorts of rules and regulations that you have to comply with. So I think the American press is a little bit more cognizant of those sorts of caveats, if you will, than our friends across the pond are. I want to talk to you, though, before we get before we run out of time here. I want to talk to you about a media story, because you've spent over 50 years in the media, which is amazing, because you're only 37.
39, yeah, right.
39 years old. That's right, 39 years old. I'm sorry.
I don't look a day over 38.
There you go. I agree. Wait a minute. Let me take a look at these glasses here. Let me just.
Yeah, right. I think you need to clean them.
All right. So
it reminds me, when I was a little boy, I've been wearing glasses for many, many years, since I was in grade school. And I wanted to, when they told me I might have to, I just thought that would be the most exciting thing. So I can't complain, and I'm not complaining, but I would wear glasses, and every once in a while my mother would say, let me see those glasses. And she would take them and hold them up to the light and go, oh my God. I didn't pay any attention to it, right? So she would clean the glasses, and I would put them on and go, oh, it is daytime. It was yeah. Anyway.
All right. So the Washington Post today broke a big news story about a new study that determined that, and I know you're going to have to, I'm glad you're sitting down.
Yeah.
Might stun you. But it turns out that memes with Hillary Clinton arm wrestling Jesus actually didn't convince any voters to change their votes in 2016. No kidding. I mean, I'm laughing about this. Yeah, the study was about the Russian disinformation campaign, right? And it's been estimated they spent somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 during a campaign in which the combined total of both campaigns spending was over $2 billion, right? So we're talking about several orders of magnitude larger. And there has been an assumption in the media and in government that just the existence of these things correlating with a presidential election means that it influenced the election. And I have been saying since the first time this came up, literally the first post I wrote about this, I raised the question, where is there any evidence that these memes on Facebook changed anybody's mind about who they were going to vote for, or even if they were going to vote? Where is any evidence that shows that? And today, 6 years later or so, 6+ years later, the Washington Post gets around to reporting that, oh yeah, nobody ever actually had any evidence that this did a damn thing in the election.
Yeah, it was just conventional wisdom, right? I think her gaffe about deplorable Americans, I think that was much more powerful.
Yeah, I mean, the gaffe about deplorable Americans, I think, was probably what lost her the election. I also think the fact that she didn't show up to campaign in Wisconsin and Michigan had a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
She showed up, I think, once or twice in Michigan. She never showed up in Wisconsin. They dispatched Barack Obama at the last minute to Michigan because the unions that were screaming for weeks were losing. And they lost in Michigan. They lost in Wisconsin. They lost in Pennsylvania, where, to give her credit, she was actually campaigning somewhat significantly in Pennsylvania. But I mean, all of this nonsense over the last 6+ years, all of the disinformation, hysteria can be traced back to an assumption that the media never bothered to fact check, which is that the presence of these stupid memes, Hillary Clinton arm wrestling Jesus. I mean, that was actually one of the memes, right? Hillary Clinton's arm wrestling Jesus, and that's why you should vote for Donald Trump, whatever it was. None of that none of that convinced anybody to vote one way or the other. Why? No. Because it's nonsense, and
that feeds the disbelief in media and the lack of the continuing decay of credibility. in the media because they buy these things and they pass them on.
Yeah, Joseph Bernstein wrote a book about this a couple of years ago, talking about the basically big disinfo and the fact that all of this disinformation hysteria, and again, you got to put that in scare quotes because disinformation, it's just nonsense. But it basically is turned into an industrial complex because it serves the purposes of government functionaries. It serves the purposes of media outlets that want to be seen as the arbiters of truth, and it also serves the interests of big tech. And Bernstein actually made a really good point: was that at first Mark Zuckerberg was a voice of reason on this.
Yeah,
because when he went to Congress, remember what he said? There's no way that this election got decided because the Russians spent a few $100,000 on memes. Nobody's making their decisions based on Facebook memes. Yeah. And he got all sorts of blowback from members of Congress. And then he changed his tune. And Bernstein argues the reason why he changed his tune is because he realized that narrative suits Facebook. It makes them look a lot more influential than they actually are. And what does that do for you? It gets you more advertisers.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The narrative that I don't remember in my long reporting career narratives playing such an important role. There was always Tricky Dick Nixon, and I don't know what else.
Yeah, but I think that slogans and nicknames, I mean, I think those things tend to have a sort of an organic flow to them, and you report on them because they're part of the organic flow. This is really something else. I mean, this is something that is just clearly defies all common sense, and then basically punishing anybody who questions those assumptions. And we saw it a lot in COVID. My friend Adam Baldwin about that in the Amiable Skeptic shows.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the conventional wisdom is dangerous, and you have to be careful. To my mind, the internet is a wonderful thing, but what it did was, and I've said this before here, it put more responsibility on news consumers to sort out what was credible and what was not. And I'm not sure that they've stepped up to the plate collectively as much as they should have. They just sort of take the one that sounds more compelling or that fits their narrative, and they run with it, as opposed to thinking, I'm for him, but this is against his opponent. This is crap.
Well, and we know that because the Hillary Clinton arm wrestling Jesus thing was so convincing. The thought of that is absurd on its face. It was absurd on its face 6+ years ago when I was writing about it. You were writing about it at the time. I mean, it took 6 years for the Washington Post to question that. Seriously?
You can't explain it. They've lost a lot of subscribers in the last year or so, more than 500,000, I think. And online subscribers. And the LA Times, I see the Washington Post is offering, I think it was $1 a week for online all access digital, and the LA Times is offering $1 for 6 months.
That's it might be overpriced at that rate. All right, well, we're almost out of time. What's priceless beyond measure?
What's that, Ed?
The jokes of the week. I say that in anticipation because I'm not sure that you have any this week, but
no, I got some. They're all old, of course.
Of course.
So these are all obviously old. Jimmy Fallon said, this is some years back, I think it was 2015. Joe Biden says he will decide on a 2016 presidential campaign by the spring or the summer. Then he added, whichever comes first. Conan O'Brien said that they just discovered a rare 1860 envelope from the very first day of the Pony Express. And it was actually an invitation or an envelope containing an invitation to Larry King's bar mitzvah. And finally, Conan also said that the highest paid reality stars are Kim Kardashian at $6 million and Jersey Shore's of the situation at $5 million. So kids, let this be a lesson. Stay out of school.
Stay out of school. Don't get an education.
Money's more important than education.
Oh yeah, I guess so. These days, it certainly seems that way. Don't ask, pertinent questions. That's another thing. But
isn't that something?
We've already covered that. Yeah, we've already covered that topic. But I'm going to be chewing on that one for a while. But you know who you need to be reading in the meantime is the Prince of Twitter at AH Malcolm, and over the region of redstate.com, where he's got all of his great commentary over there. It's exclusive to Red State because I wasn't fast enough to grab this guy up when I had the chance.
Not
Bitter?
So.
No.
You have a very productive team turning out lots of interesting stuff.
Well, that's true. I got a great
these
team.
days. Yeah, you really do.
I've got a great team.
Well, if people are listening to this, they're probably already reading it. But if they aren't, they should be.
That's right. And just to let everybody know, I've actually put David Strom on double rations this week because. But I also have told them that I expect to go water skiing in the afternoon. That's an old joke too, but I'll. All right, Andrew Malcolm, thanks so much for being with us. We'll talk to you again next week, sir.
Okie doke. Thanks, everybody. See you then.
Stay tuned for more, actually, from the Ed Morrissey Show coming up next. This is Ed Morrissey of hotair.com for Townhall. Did a Russian troll farm meme of Hillary Clinton arm wrestling Jesus really cost her the 2016 election? After more than 6 years of unrelenting hysteria over disinformation, the Washington Post belatedly reported on a study that concluded what everyone should have known already. Data shows that Russian interference via supposed disinformation didn't impact voter choices at all. All of this irrational panic over a minor social media intrusion in a national campaign has done real damage to free speech. Congress demanded censorship from social media and tech giants, who saw this as an opportunity to interfere in American political processes for their own ends. All these warped incentives created a government media industrial censorship complex that it plagues us to this day. They all failed to ask the basic question of whether memes change voter decisions at any scale, let alone enough to decide a national election. Shame on them all. I'm Ed Morrissey. Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to Jeff Wallack, who is not only a voice on Wyoming's one of Wyoming's biggest radio stations. He's also a friend of ours, Jeff Wallack, whose family has been connected to mine for, I don't know, decades. Jeff,
at least maybe a century.
Could be a century. Feels that way sometimes, especially first thing in the morning. I get up and, oh yeah, it's been a century or so since I felt good. All right, so tell us a little bit, Jeff, about your radio station. First off, where are you at in Wyoming, and what is it that you do there?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Ed. This is pretty exciting to be on your show. I'm in Sheridan, Wyoming, which is northeast Wyoming, about 2 hours from Billings, Montana, and an hour and a half from Gillette in the South Dakota border. We are on a station called Kix 96.5, which is actually a Wyoming country station. But I pitched the show to have a conservative talk show, and they ate it up, and they gave me time on Saturday mornings to develop the show. And we have now, for 7 months, we have reached 35 shows on a week, just a weekly show on Saturday. Kicks 96.5 is one of the largest stations in Wyoming, especially in the Northeast. They have, it's a network called the Bighorn Mountain Radio Network, which is in Gillette, Cody, and in Sheridan, Buffalo area. And I was lucky enough to be invited to host a conservative talk show called Wyoming is Right, RIGHT, conservative talk radio. And after 7 months, we got an email accepting an invitation to come on the show by President Trump.
Wow. See, now this is why we're going to talk here is that is a big, huge deal. Look, I mean, I did a similar show in the Twin Cities for several years. In fact, a couple of my friends are still doing it there. Saturday, well, afternoon for us. It wasn't morning, but Saturday afternoon radio. We were given some time to launch a local, state, and national politics broadcast on what was already a political, politics radio station. And it was a blast. We had a great time doing this. We did this for, I was doing it for 8 or 9 years. And like I said, my colleagues in that endeavor are still doing it a decade later. So, I mean, it's been very successful there too. So I know exactly what it's like to do something like that. I can tell you that we got a number of really cool guests on that, including the governor at the time, Tim Pawlenty, but we never got him as a presidential candidate, and we never got a former president to come on the show. That is pretty remarkable for a Saturday morning politics show even on a big platform like Kicks 95.
Well, I was pretty surprised myself, let me tell you. But I'm excited as heck. I'm a big Trump supporter. My hat is Wyoming.
I see Trump. That. Yeah.
And I've been a supporter since 16, when I realized he was an actual conservative, and I am an actual conservative. So we jumped on board then. We've been with him ever since. He proved himself during his term. We were very disappointed that the Dems stole the election in 2020. I am a big believer that happened. And we're going to support him in 24. No, you're right. 24. And of course, he was the first one out of the gate announcing that. And so, clearly, I mean, what is it that you plan to ask him about when he gets on the air with you? I'm sure, the interesting thing about this, how long is your show on Saturday afternoons? It's only for a half hour, which I'm hoping it will run over a little bit, because
I think
he's only given us 15 minutes, Ed, but I'm hoping he's going to give us a whole half hour or longer.
I'm going to tell you, you better give a heads up to the station management, because Donald Trump likes to talk. And once you get him on the air, he kind of likes to keep going. And I think the other thing you might want to alert them to is the fact that, those hard outs that, at the top or the bottom of the hour, you might want to tell your engineer to find ways to possibly have to bypass those, because, he knows radio, he knows television, he knows how that works. But, every once in a while you gotta bite the bullet and shave off the advertisers for a turn, just so you can make sure that your primo guest gets his say. And Donald Trump likes to get a say. I think it's going to be very exciting for you. It
is. And I've already warned them, and our the producers and engineers are aware and ready, and all our supporters. I think they're even more excited than I am. So
of course,
I think we're going to have it all worked out in the morning. We'll be there early and ready for his call in to the show. The key here is, I'm a huge supporter, so I'll be asking him questions that are important to Wyoming as well as to the nation. I'm going to lead with voter integrity. How are we going to make sure that he takes office this time? He wins a popular vote. He wins the Electoral College this time in 24. We want to make sure he actually takes office and is sworn back into office. So that's number one. We're going to ask him what kind of effort he is going to make to ensure a credible election. 2, we're going to talk about what's important to Wyoming as well, which is water, land, and jobs. And right now, Biden is trying to steal our water. We believe they're mismanaging land, federal lands for us that we need for oil drilling for the nation, for energy. So that's going to be a big topic. And then we'll see how much time we get to get into free speech and the tech cancellations of free speech and denying conservatives the right to speak on the air and on various technical platforms. So we'll be talking about that too.
I think it's a great topic, right? Because I mean, not only did that impact the 2020 election cycle, but we're really starting to see the scope of just how much that interference is. I was just talking on with Andrew Malcolm on my regular one of my regular podcast guests, co-host really, and about the Washington Post report. It came out today while we're recording this. We're recording it on a Monday, and about how a recent study just showed that all of this hysteria about how Russian trolls impacted an American election is just sheer nonsense.
Absolutely.
Which everybody should have understood that right from the beginning. I mean, the Russians put something, I think it was something like $100,000 or a few $100,000 into this, even if it was a couple of $1 million. The combined campaigns, just the combined campaign, spent close to $2 billion on that election using real advertising. I don't think that is something that a picture of Hillary Clinton arm wrestling Jesus is really going to compete with.
It was incredible. I mean, it was a hoax, and they made it up. And I think there should be some prosecution of these devils, I call them, who actually lied about the election, lied about the Russian hoax, and had been doing it. I agree with the president. It's been a witch hunt ever since, and we've got to put a stop to it.
Well, I mean, I think just the fact that you have this sort of and what I've described as a industrial government media industrial complex. Joseph Bernstein called it the big disinfo complex that is now in place to censor social media debate, to censor individuals and groups, block them from participating in online discussions based on point of view, which is I don't think it's going too far to call that un-American, right? That's just simply un-American, trying to censor people. Yeah, it
is un-American, and you know what? It's terrible that Congress, on the floor and elsewhere, on the media, lie. Like Schiff, I mean, everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie. Yeah. I think we've got to put a stop to this, because they have a license to lie all day long. It's unbelievable. If you can't stop them, we got to find ways to go on the offensive finally and prosecute these guys. Got to find some law that allows us to do that.
And we're talking with Jeff Wallack. And Jeff, I mean, moving from Trump, by the way, before we move off of Trump, when is this interview going to take place? And where can people, if you're not in Wyoming, is it possible to access this? Do you have a stream on the internet?
Yes, sir. Thank you for prompting me. The show is going to be taped tomorrow, the 10th, Tuesday. It will air on this Saturday, the 14th of January, and it will be heard worldwide on WyomingIsRight.com. That's RIGHT.com. All the shows we have ever broadcast have been recorded and uploaded to that website. So if you have Wi-Fi, you have access to it. You don't have to be in Wyoming, but if you're in Northeast Wyoming, we encourage you to tune in to hear the broadcast just as we air it for the very first time.
So this is pretty good, because now you can actually edit around the commercial interruptions. I didn't realize it was a pre-record, which is actually the best. Right? When you're dealing with this, it's the best, because if there's an issue that pops up at the last minute, you can get it corrected without losing precious airtime on this. And so, yeah, that's actually great news.
Usually the host is the one who needs the editing, not the interviewee. So I have time to get it fixed.
I'm pretty sure that the people who produce this podcast for me probably agree with you on that. All right, but now that we've gotten that out of the way, I want to talk to you about what happened in the House of Representatives this past week, because I think that there's two schools of thought here, which is that this was a meltdown, it's humiliation, it's terrible, it's the end of the world as we know it, and the other of which, and I have to say, I started out sort of in that camp, but after talking with my friend Adam Baldwin, I kind of migrated pretty quickly over to the other camp, which is that what we're seeing right now is legislating, negotiating, which is what the House of Representatives is supposed to be doing. And first off, what was your impression of that? And second off, what are you expecting to see now out of the House of Representatives?
Well, I had a similar view. I mean, I watched the whole thing from start to finish, and I got nervous and more nervous and more nervous. And I'm a House Freedom Caucus supporter, and a lot of my friends, including Harriet Hageman, who we just elected and ousted Liz Cheney with, is a member. So like I was texting her on the House floor going, Harriet, if we let this go far too much further, the Dems are going to join with a moderate, a liberal Republican, and they're going to be speaker. They're going to elect that person speaker. We can't have that. And she said exactly what we have to fix or prevent. And I switched over and I said, okay, let's just let this play out. And it's a negotiation. If we get better rules, fine, as long as we don't go too extreme, because how can the speaker run 218 members or 216 members with it by committee? You can't. You've got to have a strong leader, and I'm hoping we still have that. That was my biggest concern. I think we will. I think they're going to give him some time to get his feet on the ground and learn this role. It's not going to be easy, though.
No, I don't think it's going to be easy. But then again, if you got a 5-seat majority, or a 5-seat, actually 4-seat cushion, it's a 9-seat majority, but
yes,
basically a 4 or 5 cushion. It's tight. It's going to be tight. I mean, Nancy Pelosi had that problem, and she did actually. People say, "Well, Nancy Pelosi ran it. She was able to run it." Then Kevin McCarthy's incompetent. Yeah, Nancy Pelosi barely ran it, and she kept falling on her face because progressives kept holding the infrastructure bill hostage, and she kept putting the thing on the floor only to pull it back, and et cetera. I mean, people forget, I think, what a clown show that it kind of turned into for several months in the House. And I suspect we're going to see a lot of that. And I think people are going to make more of a big deal out of it than it actually is. But honestly, Jeff, I think that the main issue for House Republicans in this session isn't going to be moving conservative legislation, because it's not going to get through the Senate anyway. It certainly wouldn't Joe Biden's signature. I think the big issue is really oversight over the Biden administration, right? And a completely constitutional and legitimate function of both chambers of Congress is to provide oversight on the executive branch. And I kind of like what I've had to see so far about what they're going to be aiming at. This whole idea of of having a select committee on the weaponization of law enforcement by the federal, by the executive branch. I mean, I'm certain that that's probably music to your ears as well as to mine.
It is. I agree 100%. I think we've got to cut spending, and we got to talk about that. We also have to pull together as conservatives and lead the rest of the party. I think this is the opportunity, and I'm really counting on McCarthy being able to pull that off, and Scalise and the rest of the leadership team. We have to defend Republicans from attacks. We have to go after the Biden administration for legitimate purposes and prosecute where they've broken the law. And that includes the president. I think he has, and we've got to find that out as actual is the case or not, and follow up with it. But I also think we need to lead, and we have to bring independents and moderate Democrats into the party. And This is the way to do that, because we now have leadership in the House, and that we have to represent the party there through legislation and do what they can accomplish. I know it's going to be tough for the Senate, but they have 2 years, and maybe we'll get the Senate back then, but they got to demonstrate the ability to govern today for 2 years, get the Senate back, and hopefully we'll get the White House back as well.
All right. One last question for Jeff Wallack. It's a trick question, so prepare yourself, Jeff. Here it comes. If Donald Trump chooses not to run in 2024, and he might, I mean, it's a long process. I'm assuming that Liz Cheney is going to get your endorsement, right?
Oh, not a chance in hell. I'm sorry I said hell on the line, but no. I was honored to have the opportunity to be part of a selection committee to draft a candidate. And I actually called Harriet and asked her to run. I wasn't the only one.
Right.
Probably thousands called her and contacted her, but we actually had that conversation, and she said she would consider it. And then when we heard that, we worked hard to get Trump to meet her, and that happened. And we all know that that ended up in an endorsement. But Liz Cheney has always been on our card to eliminate as soon as we could. And this was a time. It was a 40-point defeat against an incumbent.
It's amazing. So embarrassing for her. So embarrassing for her.
And 3-1 in money, Ed. It was 15 million to 5. It was incredible.
Just goes to show you that voters can make a difference. They can make those choices. And it doesn't have to be about who spends the most money. It doesn't have to be about, who's got the bigger name. It can really be about who represents your values. And Wyoming made a very good call on that. And Jeff Wallack is part of that. Jeff, give us the URL one more time for the website for your radio show.
Thank you. Wyoming is right, RIGHT.com. Wyoming is right.com. All our shows are there. You can email me through there, jeff@wyomingisright.com. Let's start a conversation.
There you go, Jeff Wallack. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll talk to you again soon, sir.
Thanks, Ed. Good to talk to you. Take care.
Talk to you, and stay tuned for one last message from the Ed Morrissey Show coming up next. Thanks for watching and listening to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. I just want to drop you a note to remind you that we are still going into 2024 with guns blazing, if you will, and with all sorts of momentum going towards Republicans. Even after a disappointing midterm cycle, there is plenty of reason to be hopeful about what's coming up in 2024. There is also plenty of reason to worry about the impact that big tech and government agencies like DHS are going to have on the political debate, especially on big social media platforms. That's why it is still more important than ever to support Hot Air and our other Town Hall properties by becoming a VIP or a VIP Gold member. Now, being a VIP member or VIP Gold member means that you can comment on the posts, and the comment sections are getting very lively. Great comment sections. We're really getting a good commentary out there in the com boxes. But you also get exclusive content such as Dwayne Patterson's twice weekly columns, Tom Jackson's twice weekly columns from Florida, which is going to be a key battleground in 2024 and a key indicator, especially if Ron DeSantis does get into the race as we expect, of where the Republican Party is going to go. We've got The Amiable Skeptics with Adam Baldwin and I, twice weekly, 2 episodes a week, our video presentation exclusive for VIP members. Plus, we have the VIP Gold Chat with Cam Edwards of BearingArms.com. It's the most fun hour of the week. And I can tell you that both Cam and I will every single time make that claim. The most fun hour of the week, and our VIP Gold members get a chance to participate in it by putting in their comments and questions, and we respond directly to those. In fact, that's the entire reason for having that 1 hour chat on Wednesdays at 1:30 Eastern time. If you're a VIP or VIP Gold member, you can be part of that, and you can use the promo code Save America, and get a 25% discount off of VIP and VIP Gold membership. So be sure to do that. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching the Ed Morrissey Show.